Hey everybody, welcome back to the Backcountry Manifesto podcast, brought to you by the fine folks at Sharedport, who we recently worked with to make this barrel selection. It's going to be available exclusive to you guys. That's a teaser. It's time to tease the episode. Today on the show, we are talking to Pete Larson. Pete Larson is a paleontologist and the owner and curator of the Black Hills Institute of Geological Research, and also the subject of Emmy award-winning documentary Dinosaur 13, which follows his team's discovery of Sue, one of the largest and most complete Tyrannosaurus specimens ever found, and the subsequent chaos that, well, ensued. So we're going to talk about all that, a ton of T-Rex, a ton of dinosaur stuff. This was shot on location at the Black Hills Institute, which has the densest collection of dinosaurs per square centimeter of anywhere on Earth. So if you're a dino nerd, you're going to love this. Without further ado, Pete Larson.
What got you into dinosaurs in the first place?
When I was 4 years old, I picked up a fossil mammal tooth, an orient tooth, on my folks' ranch. And it was black. I know it was a tooth, but it was black because I'd seen skulls of dead cows and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And took it to the local museum, and June Zeitner, who was kind of running the museum, took me under her wing, and she, loaned me books, and ever I have a question, I just go ask her. And so she was my mentor. And so I try to do that. I try to return that to kids as much as I can. You know, if a kid's got a real interest, I'm there for him.
Is that what kind of like, I know like the science is, let's walk as we're doing this, because we started the podcast. Welcome. I know that's, Is that what kind of keeps you into it? Like, what is the thing that kind of has its hook in you?
Well, I'm always learning something. Certainly, because we do our own collecting, that we're out there in the field, and I'm seeing new things all the time. You know, learning something all the time, and that's, it doesn't get better than that. I sort of have what I call the Peter Pan syndrome, and like most paleontologists, I've never grown up. And it's just something that is important to me and then to spread that, oh, this is cool, and not only an idea or maybe an answer to a question, but just the physical aspect of that fossil. It's something that's been dead for 66 million years and you can hold it in your hand, or for 100 million years, or 400 million years, or 500 million years. And when you're holding that in your hand, you can see that evolution is real. You can see that extinction is real. You can see that our planet, although life finds a way, to quote a famous movie, although life finds a way, we also can destroy a lot of our planet. We're not going to destroy our planet, but we're going to really screw it up, and we're especially screwing it up for us.
Yeah, I think that's like a crazy. What is it? The people who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it, right?
That's right.
It's kind of in like a bigger sort of way. It's like, well, look, man, it's not these like little lessons inside this like really tight spiral of like time that we call human history. It's like the world is much bigger than people.
Yes.
I think that's also like kind of important, right? It's like seeing outside people in the context of.
And when you're digging up something like this, you start wondering about what was it like when it was alive? What was its behavior? They're not just these dead things that, fill up museum halls. They were individual animals that roamed this planet and did things. They made love. They had feasts. they had dinner parties, so to speak. They did all kinds of fun things or interesting things of the same thing that living animals do today, even humans. And so looking at them as an individual rather than just a pile of bones is something that's always been important to me.
Yeah. Speaking of things that are dead, I'm going to die if I don't cough real quick. All right, so we're back. I didn't die. BHI, they do have cups of water handy in case you are a choking podcast host. Anyhow, one of the things that you're known specifically, well, amidst all this other great stuff, you're known as kind of the T-Rex dude, in my opinion. Like that's sort of how I know you. I would love to hear a couple things. One of the things I would like to hear is if you could explain the Nanotyrannus controversy to me.
Sure.
Because I do kind of understand it, but also like I don't kind of understand it. And, you know, when we talked to Jack Horner, we had talked about dinosaur ontogeny. And, you know, so I think he kind of posits, right, that it's a juvenile T-Rex.
Yeah, and not all things are answered by ontogeny. For instance, a friend, a really famous paleontologist, Dr. Robert Bacher, says he'd really like to have a symposium titled Ontogenetic Series, Real and Imagined. Because sometimes people group things together that don't belong together. And so Nanotyranus is one of those things, and I can show you over here. I've got a little exhibit that we put up.
And what you're kind of talking about there is like the lumpers and splitters kind of thing. Is that what it is?
Sort of, but so it has become in vogue with Jack and with Tom Carr, especially with Nanotyrannus, that he had a nice hypothesis, and it was a valid hypothesis. It was an idea that Nanotyrannus lancensis, and this is the type specimen, a cast of the type specimen. And as you can see, it's a pretty good skull, but there's, some things about it that are missing. That's the dark color there.
Okay.
And so he said, well, what if that was a juvenile T-Rex? And it was a perfectly good hypothesis. But
sure,
when you make a hypothesis in science, you try to disprove it. Not try to prove what you said. So if you can't disprove it, then it's true. Then it's probably true. But so I looked at that question, and then shortly after he made that, let's say this is 1999, I think he published the paper. In 2001, I helped collect this specimen. This is the skull that the brain case is made, but most in the back, the surrangular of the lower jaw is made, but the rest of that is pretty much all that specimen. And one of the things that became clear is whatever Nanotyrannus was, this was the same thing. And one of the characters is, you see that hole in the back of that's called the quadratojugal. There's a little, that little, not the big hole in the lower jaw, but above that. Right above where the articulation is, there's a little hole there.
Yeah.
And that's a pneumatic foramen. Nanotyrannus is the only dinosaur that has a pneumatic foramen in its quadratojugal, which means it's something very unusual. So pneumatic. Can
you say that sentence again? In his quadratojugal? What was that?
That bone is called the quadratojugal.
Okay.
It touches both the quadrate and the jugal. Okay. So the jugal is a cheekbone, quadrate is that bone that forms a ball on the skull for the ball and socket joint of the lower jaw.
Gotcha. Okay.
Anyway, but maybe more visual than that is the difference in the number of teeth and the morphology of the teeth. So if you look at this case over here, this is a juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex jaw, a dentary. It has the tooth row length is almost identical to Jane. Here's Jane's lower jaw, the dentary, and you can see the number of teeth there. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 alveoli. That's where the teeth go in. 17 holes for teeth.
Okay.
T-Rex has 12 or 13.
Oh, so it's like it's kind of like
it's got at least 3 more teeth in its lower jaw. Now, Tom said, well, through ontogeny, Tyrannosaurus rex loses 3 teeth out of the lower jaw and a bunch out of the upper jaw too.
Okay.
But the problem is no living animal today does that. In the fossil record, if you have a false ontogenetic series, you might see it, like he was proposing here. But if that is true, T-Rex is the only animal that loses tooth positions. Now, so this has only 12 teeth, and that's a juvenile T-Rex. Notice the size of the teeth, how big and how massive they are. They're also more circular in cross-section. Nanotyrannus teeth are compressed. Nanotyrannus teeth have a much smaller serrations. In other words, per inch, they have more serrations than T-Rex does in any stage in life. And if we look at a very close relative, Tyrannosaurus bataar, or also called Tarbosaurus bataar, This is a juvenile Tarbosaurus skeleton here. It has, so this is even smaller. So Tarbosaurus gets to be almost the size of T-Rex. This juvenile is even smaller than that Nanotyrannus skull.
Huh.
It has exactly the same number of teeth as it does in the adult.
Oh.
There's also the first maxillary tooth. The first tooth next, so the premaxilla here has, these are our incisors. Our canine is between the maxilla and the premaxilla. On Nanotyrannus and on Gorgosaurus and on Alioramus, we have those dinosaurs have what's called an incisiform first maxillary tooth, which means it looks just like the premaxillary teeth, which are very different than the maxillary teeth. And so there's a whole mess of differences. There's something like 40 some different characters in the skull that are different for Nanotyrannus than they are from Tyrannosaurus rex. Any other dinosaur, if you had that many differences, and nobody would question that it's not something different.
But because people are so attached to a T-Rex.
People are attached to T-Rex, and Thomas Carr has defended it. He's very eloquent in his defenses, but still, he just unfortunately has not been able to admit that he's wrong. Now, the dueling dinosaurs have a beautiful, complete, absolutely complete, except for one claw, of a skeleton of Nanotyrannus. And we see some other differences that we couldn't necessarily see from Jane because we didn't have a good neck. A Tyrannosaurus rex like Stan, the neck, or the skull, is 1.5 times longer than the neck. On Nanotyrannus, the neck is actually longer than the skull. So it's the ratio and proportion of 1.5 for Tyrannosaurus rex and 0.9 for Nanotyrannus. That's a morphological change that doesn't make a whole lot of sense in going from a 2-foot skull to a 4-foot skull.
Sure. So I'm gonna say it to you as maybe I understand it, and then you could tell me if I'm wrong. Hold on, we got a T-Rex calling. We'll be right back. Here's a word from our sponsor, SharedPort.
Hey everybody, we're about to get back to the show, but real quick, I want to tell you about our partner SharedPort.com, who we recently worked with to pick this awesome 9-year single barrel whiskey that's going to be available to you guys. I'm going to tell you more about that in a second. In the meantime, SharedPort.com is your source for all things liquor, hard to find spirits, and allocated items. They have an unrivaled inventory. They have an unrivaled shipping department. They do flat rate shipping, meaning you can get multiple bottles shipped to you for the same price. To anyone 21 or over in the lower 48. They are great people to work with, and they have a killer selection. If you have a special event, this is how you find that awesome spirit to bring with you. Speaking of awesome bottles, we recently collaborated on this hand-picked 9-year. I drink a lot of whiskey. I don't have a problem, but I do have a pretty good palate. This is one of my favorite that I've ever had. I tasted through 10, 15 barrels to get to this one. I'm really proud of it. You're gonna love it, and it's going to be available exclusively to you guys. We have more details on that to come. In the meantime, remember, SharedPort.com. Go get them.
Thank you, SharedPort. You guys should buy stuff from them. Anyhow, what I was getting at was the way that I'm understanding it based on what you're telling me is I'm kind of comparing it to the diagnostic feature of 2 types of catfish. You count the anal rays on a catfish, and that's what separates, like you can tell like 2 species that are very similar, like a channel cat and a small blue cat, right? And if you count the anal rays on the fin, it seems like a pretty trivial difference, except that it's like crazy diagnostic. And so you're kind of saying that in addition to, and it's funny when you were talking about like the only creature that like loses teeth at
positions, yeah.
And I was like, oh well, but my wisdom teeth, I was like, oh no, I took those out on purpose.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the anal fins, and man, you really can see the difference in these teeth. At least like these to me are more like a fine like steak knife. It's like, and these to me are like, you're like butcher knife.
Yeah.
It's like a heavier, hardier thing. It seems like it's like kind of meant for whatever. And
yeah, those are fillet and butcher. Yep.
Yeah.
So the real killer though is over the past So since 2006, we found a number of specimens where we have more hand bones. You know, the first hand of Tyrannosaurus rex was found in 1990. Both Sioux and Museum of the Rockies specimen MOR 555 had a hand. Well, now we have a number of other ones that have hands or partial hands, and it turns out that even though the biggest Nanotyranus skull we have is about 2 feet long, the biggest T-Rex skull we have is 4.5 feet long. If we take that information and we look at the hands and all the hand bones, every single hand bone from Nanotyrannus is bigger than every single hand bone from T-Rex. That means that the only way to grow, to make, so this is a Nanotyrannus hand here, and here's these are the 2 biggest hands we have for T-Rex, and there's a smaller hand. But every single bone in the hand of Nanotyrannus, including their claws, is bigger than every single hand bone we have for T-Rex, which means in order to take a Nanotyrannus and have grow up to T-Rex, you'd have to literally shrink their hands a lot and then grow them again, partially. You'd never get to the same size. No animal does that either.
And it would be like, and if that is a juvenile like T-Rex, that'd be like a little kid walking around with like Dikembe Mutombo sized like Shaquille O'Neal hands.
Yeah.
Huh.
But Shaquille O'Neal hands on a little kid, like you said, instead of, and then as Shaquille O'Neal grew up, his hands grew smaller and then grew a little bit again.
Yeah, it's not like when you have like a teenager where it's like they grow into their feet. It's like no, he shrunk into his feet shrunk into his body.
So what that does, those the morphological differences in the skull and body, the difference in the neck proportions to the skull, the difference in the tooth numbers, the difference in the tooth morphology, and the hands show that falsifies that hypothesis that Nanotyrannus is a juvenile Tyrannosaurus rex. And anybody who's an anatomist would agree with that.
Yeah, you just feel like it's crazy diagnostic.
It's crazy diagnostic, and maintaining that false hypothesis now, it's falsified, is detrimental to our science.
Yeah, you're just not into that.
And so I'm okay with, I mean, if it would have been my theory, I'd have been just fine with it, or my hypothesis, it would have been just fine with it being falsified, because that, as a scientist, we want to know the answer. We should not have a vested interest in what that answer is. You know, maybe it was my idea that Nanotyrannus was a juvenile T-Rex. Well, that's too bad. I had, and I've had ideas that have also been falsified. I thought that we could tell the sex based upon, and this is based upon the work of Romer, that the chevrons, which are those little spines at the base of the tail, he published that they were different in male and female crocodiles. And I thought, well, if we find enough specimens, we might be able to show that for Tyrannosaurus rex.
Oh, sure.
Well, it turns out in alligators, that's not true. Oh. And a colleague of mine, Greg Erickson, said, and I published a number of papers saying, giving that hypothesis. And he said, a student of mine did a bunch of measuring and a bunch of counting of chevrons, and it's completely random. They have, that one extra one could be a male or a female. And I said, well, that's really cool. Now we know the answer. And so he asked me to put my name on the paper as well, and it is, and the title of the paper is Androgynous Rex.
I like that. That's
funny. And it was great because we had the answer to it. It was an idea. It was a good idea, but it's falsified.
It seems like I should know this, and I can already hear like the YouTube comments going, "You were talking to Peter Larson and you didn't even know." I get that all the time. We did a Bigfoot expert. People were very mad that I was not a Bigfoot expert talking to a Bigfoot expert.
Why would you you can't know everything.
Trust me, I'm not even close. The Nanotyrannus, is this something that was kind of brought to the scientific realm by you, or?
No, that was Thomas Carr. So I'm saying if it would have been me, I'd have been happy to know the answer. And I've been arm waving for years about this, and now there's been a couple of papers that have come out saying, yeah, it is not a juvenile T-Rex. It absolutely cannot be.
Who was okay, sorry, I'm asking this in a bad way. Who is the person that proposed like the new species? Like this is a Nanotyrannus.
Dr. Robert Bacher, well, the first description of this skull
come over here.
Was made in 1946. And then in 1985, they then described it as a new genus, Nanotyrannus lancensis. It was put into Gorgosaurus lancensis because it has many affinities. It looks very much like Gorgosaurus. The number of teeth are more aligned with Gorgosaurus. That canine, an incisiform first maxillary tooth, is like Gorgosaurus and like Alioramus. And but it was really Bakker. It's really Bakker.
Okay, gotcha.
And interestingly enough, Bob Bakker, you might be familiar with him from the Dinosaur Heresies. It was a book that was put out in 1985. But he's one of the first guys who said dinosaurs have feathers. He's the first guy who ever drew a dinosaur with feathers, and he's had all kinds of weird ideas in his book, which just about all of them have proven to be true, which is pretty cool.
That is super cool, man.
He's really the dinosaur renaissance. He and John Ostrom, and which was one of his professors. But Dr. Bob made it very public, and he's a really excellent speaker and stuff. And so he's kind of like the Carl Sagan of paleontology.
Sure. Okay.
And anyway, so he's the guy who really said that. And then looking at his work and looking at new things because of new specimens that have been found, it's very clear.
Okay, cool. Well, we've talked about Nanotyrannus. Let's talk about regular Tyrannus.
Okay.
Tyrannosaurus Rex. When people think about dinosaurs, right? Like the first thing, it's like, well, I feel like you're in one of three camps as a little kid, right? You're either like T-Rex, Stegosaurus, or Triceratops.
Yep.
Like you feel like one of those is like.
Those are the three most popular dinosaurs that every kid knows.
Yeah. I feel like the cool kids, like if you're like kind of like the alternative kid, like the dude that likes listening to Radiohead or something, you like the Velociraptor.
Yeah. That's true. That's true.
Talk to us about T-Rex. I don't know what to ask you. Just tell me, give me the spiel.
So this is Stan. This is a cast of Stan, and Stan taught us a whole mess of cool stuff. Before that, the MOR 555 does not have a very good or very complete skull. Okay. Preservation's not as good. AMNH, the AMNH 5027, that's the one everybody knows or knew at this point in time. And then Sue had some crushing to her skull, but it was all in one piece, like the AMNH 5027. But Stan's skull was disarticulated. The individual, like almost 50 bones in a T-Rex skull were scattered about. And because of that, there was no crushing to the skull. So we're able to reassemble those, and we're able to find out that there are lots of movable joints in a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull. Everybody thought it was a fused skull that didn't do anything, but it's not. This is a joint that's a hinge. So the maxilla, if it hits something hard, like they bite through bones, they don't. If you think of Nanotyranus as stripping the flesh off a dinosaur carcass, T-Rex would eat the dinosaur carcass, including the bones. And we found
like a hyena or something.
More like a hyena. And like a hyena would kill its prey as well as scavenge. So this is a slip joint where these two bones could move apart. In the palate is all slip joints. So this was a very kinetic skull. Now, if you can think of a kinetic skull like a snake skull or some bird skulls, where you can open your mouth to swallow something bigger than your head, it's kind of can be very useful.
Sure.
Plus, with T-Rex, if it's biting the bones and it hits bones, you don't want to break a tooth every time you have a meal, because you're only going to replace those teeth about every 3 years. That's some work that Greg Erickson found in his work with T-Rex teeth. But anyway, so we have this very kinetic skull, thinking very, very differently about how this animal actually could move the bones in his skull independently. Also, you'll notice there's all kinds of weird things like this should be a solid bone. Here's a hole, here's almost a tear, and another hole back there, and another little puncture wound here. This is a puncture wound. That's a puncture wound. These guys were probably biting each other. Yep, face biting. And, maybe going for the throat and hit the jaw instead. And virtually every one of these guys has puncture wounds on their skull. Only a few of the Nanotyranus that we know of have these puncture wounds. So they were not as, they were as aggressive maybe, or certainly didn't have the luxury of biting through bones because they'd be breaking more teeth. And so these guys didn't care if they hit bone because they were eating bone all the time too.
Yeah, they were like 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah.
These skulls here, on the other side, you got kind of a lineup. Could we kind of go down these and talk about these individual specimens?
So
these are casts, right?
These are casts, right? So this is Gorgosaurus. This is actually a reasonably close relative of Nanotyrannus, much more distantly related to Tyrannosaurus rex. So this is another Tyrannosaur. This is Albertosaurus, another earlier Tyrannosaur. These are from about 72 million years ago. This one is about 78 million. And then we have, this is Duffy. So we have collected more than a dozen T-Rex specimens over our 50-year history. And Duffy is one of them. We're going to be mounting the original skeleton here cool. in Hill City. So that's one of the projects of our brand new museum that we're going to build, our newer improved building. So this is a cast of Duffy's skull, also a very nicely preserved specimen. This is Black Beauty, which is from the Tyrrell Museum. So this is a specimen from Alberta, also pretty famous specimen. This one went on tour to Japan.
Cool.
This is the LACM, the first LACM, Los Angeles County Museum specimen. This was collected by Harley Garbani, a plumber who went out collecting fossils for the museum, which is pretty cool. And then this is one called Pex Rex. So this was collected about, trying to remember, I think about 1992, something like that, when we were kind of in our throes of finding fun, or the fun Sioux story.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
And this is MOR 008. This is this specimen was collected by the Museum of the Rockies long ago, long before Jack Horner was there. And the number 008 is one of the first specimens that they had.
Super cool.
And it was collected in chunks and then prepared eventually by Jack's crew. And then this is AMH 5027, and that's the one that you always saw pictures of until Stan. Now you see almost always when you see a picture of a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull, it's Stan, because Stan is so undistorted and just a beautiful surface and all the cool stuff that it preserves. People really tend to like the way it looks. And plus we have more than 100 skeletons of Stan scattered around the world. So you can study Stan with, don't have to go too far from your home. And then I don't know how many hundred skulls that are out there.
Sure. So I want to, I sort of know the answer. It's like also like a kind of confusing thing for me. The formations here, right? Each one of these says Hell Creek Formation. This one says Willow Creek Formation.
Right.
When I think of that, I think like a lot of people, I go, oh, well, that must be this like, it must be like saying the Grand Canyon. It's different than that, right? It's not. So
these are units that are of the same age. So T-Rex was around from 67 to 66 million years ago. It was one of the, it actually, the species saw the asteroid falling and felt the heat and, were burned up in it. So the Willow Creek, the Lance Formation, the Hell Creek Formation, they're all the same age, and they're all deposited in a terrestrial environment. They're all part of the same period, all deposited within that 1 million year window. And sometimes you can see, the depositional environment was maybe a little bit different, but it's the only place that you find T-Rex too, by the way. There's a specimen from Utah that's in a different named formation, but they're all the same age.
But it's huge, really.
And Western North America is the only place that T-Rex lived, to our knowledge. We don't. In fact, the specimen that was from New Mexico now has been described as a different species because the age is a little bit different and the fauna is a little bit different. So it may be, not Tyrannosaurus Rex as.
And this is all through carbon dating?
No, you can't. So we do fossils. You don't directly, carbon dating only goes to about 50,000 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Carbon dating is not really useful for fossils. In fact, we're using all kinds of now other isotopes of different elements, and you can do laser ablation on a fossil, which does do very minor damage. You cannot see it with your naked eye what you've done, but then you gather the gases that you have burned up, basically, and then you can measure isotopes of various, usually uranium, thorium, some of the more radioactive minerals that will give you a potassium argon, will give you a date for but mostly you can't really do much with dating the actual fossil. That doesn't work because there's been all kinds of things that have happened to that fossil. So what you do is you date the rocks. So, and usually you use a volcanic ash. So potassium argon is what you use for something this old. Okay. And with that, then you can sandwich, if you have an ash layer, a volcanic ash layer above it, it's younger than that. If you have it below it, it's older than that. If you have it the ash above it, and the opposite if you've got it below it. So you can kind of sandwich them, and then we use the fossils. So okay, if Tyrannosaurus rex, if we find Tyrannosaurus rex, we know that Tyrannosaurus rex lived at this time. Most species it will not live beyond 1 million years. Because of evolution, our genome keeps changing all the time.
I never thought of that. I never would have thought of that. I was just kind of like, when there were dinosaurs, there was T-Rex, and I assumed that like a lot of these were aged at 66 million years because of like the KT boundary, and like people would just be like, well, yeah, that's like, there's that, here's this.
But so the Jurassic ones are like 145 million, and so there were no T-Rexes, there were no Tyrannosaurs. In fact, no close relatives.
Can you explain, like, to our listeners what the KT boundary is?
So the KT or KPG, Cretaceous Tertiary or Cretaceous Paleogene, that boundary is right at 66 million years old, and that records, if you have it, now it's only occurs a few places in the world in terrestrial sediments. Mm-hmm. In marine sediments, it's more abundant where you can find that boundary, and wherever we find that boundary, we find what we call an iridium anomaly, if that was actual sediment being deposited at that time. And the Walter and Luis Alvarez are the ones that thought, well, they actually weren't looking for it, but they went across the border and they measured for rare earths, and particularly iridium, and they found an iridium anomaly, a high amount of iridium in that little 1 centimeter clay or 2 centimeter clay, depending upon where you were. And they postulated that because it's more common, iridium, in meteorites or asteroids, that perhaps this records a large asteroid fall. And they then kind of estimated how, in order to have worldwide distribution like this, that asteroid would have had to have been about 10 kilometers or 6 miles across. Which would have left a 180-mile crater. Yeah. And so nobody knew, it turns out that the crater had actually been discovered, but it didn't all come together until much later. And so it turns out that the Chicxulub impact site, which is on the Yucatan Peninsula, or on the edge of the Yucatan Peninsula, is that site where that asteroid fell. And there's now, looks like there was a smaller chunk of the asteroid that fell in another place, which is kind of cool now.
Yeah,
so some new things. And they have now taken samples. They've done drilling in this impact site and have found just exactly what you would expect. And so it is. And when that asteroid hit, if you can imagine something that's coming in at 50,000 or 40,000 miles an hour, it basically turns into pure energy. And that is like 50 billion Hiroshima blasts.
Wow.
And it literally covered the earth, and the earth burned down basically, and basically killed all plant life, killed almost all the animal life, except if you could hide. And maybe in a dinosaur carcass or something,
right, and
survive on dinosaur jerky, like mammals were able to. I don't know that, but anyway, that the fact that life survived shows us how resilient life can be, because that was a worldwide event that just wiped out the dinosaurs. And this part of North America was hit because the oblique angle with that asteroid hit, actually we got the worst of it here. Mm. And there's Unfortunately, so there, and it turns out that the diversity at that time was much greater than people originally thought. And we only have this small sample because in most places that KPG boundary on land is not preserved.
There are places, correct me if I'm wrong, where you can see it, like stratified. And how if you found like a very good example of it, like the best example that you know of, what does it look like?
So you'll see usually in the Hell Creek Formation, you'll usually see normal sedimentation going on where you have little coal seams, and you'll have stream channel deposits, and you'll have overbank deposits, which are basically floodplain deposits, and then they'll repeat and repeat and repeat over again. And then, but where you see the KPG boundary, if that boundary is preserved, you will see about a 1 centimeter, maybe up to 2 centimeters thick layer of clay. And if you look at that layer of clay, you can find shock quartz, and you can find microtectites, and you can find an anomalous amount of iridium. And so there's quite a number of recognized sites. We found a number of sites ourselves too. And in fact, I've taken samples of that, and we've been able to. It's usually soft sediment, so you have to just fill them with glue, and then carefully polish them and stuff, and keep filling them with glue until you've got where you can really see a good cross section of the KPG boundary. So it's on land. It occurs just in a few spots, which is, there's a few spots in Wyoming that are recognized, in North Dakota and in South Dakota, and Montana, of course.
Sure. I was talking to Robert De Palma.
Yep.
And he mentioned that, you all kind of identified it over at his Tannus
Yeah.
Is that true? Cool. All right. I don't want to get too hung up on that. I just wanted to kind of talk about how we're getting at 66 million years on all these things. And again, I think you explained it great the first time. I don't think we need to rehash it.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a T-Rex centric podcast.
Okay. We like T-Rex.
Well, you're particularly known for one T-Rex, and let's. I want to scoot over here because there's some really cool stuff everywhere. This is a very cool spot to be in. Our studio is cool. This is way cooler. I want to talk about this.
Okay.
Producer Andrew, you're gonna have to get after one of these one day. Dinosaur. So this is that is a picture of you guys at the red carpet for the Emmy ceremony. Dinosaur 13.
Yeah. So this producer approached me about wanted to do something on dinosaurs, and he was thinking about doing the controversy between selling fossils and how amateurs and commercial people and are kind of against, or at least the some academics think they're against. So it's one world, but clashing and stuff. And I said, there's another story you might think of, and we sent him a copy of Rex Appeal. So Rex Appeal came about because of a very interesting dinosaur, Sue, right here. This was our first T-Rex, and your first love is always your most fond of your first love. And
Catherine, that's not true. Don't listen to him.
So T-Rex hold a special place in our heart, shall we say? Mm-hmm. Sue we found it in 1990 and excavated and had it here in our lab, preparing it for 20 months approximately. And then all of a sudden one day I came to work and the FBI had surrounded the place, and with demanding that we turn over Sue, which they said was collected from federal land.
Cliffhanger. Okay. Let's unpack this in a little slower. Why is it named Sue? Can you tell me about like that dig that y'all were on previous to everything kind of going down? You're with this lady here.
Yep, Susan Hendrickson. So Susan Hendrickson was volunteer with us, and kind of a long story, but we had a flat tire, and she said, well, there's this bank I wanted to go look at. We had permission to collect and to look around the neighboring ranches. One of them belonged to Morris Williams, and this particular cliff was on Morris Williams' property. And so she went and she came back with a couple of pieces of bone, about this big.
Yep.
And I'd never seen the inside of a T-Rex vertebrae before, but I knew that was what I was looking at because it had what we call trabecula. It looked like honeycomb inside of it. Oh. And this is something that occurs in modern birds today, and it occurs in theropods, which are the ancestors of our living birds. Mm-hmm. And so we said, was there more? She said, there's a lot more. So we literally ran over from a Triceratops. We were digging up Triceratops skull. And here dripping out of this hillside is just thousands of pieces of bone. Really? And so we got permission from the landowner, made sure he owned the land, Morris Williams, and excavated it and paid him $5,000. This is before people were spending lots of money on dinosaurs. Sure. And we wanted to build, this is the anchor for our museum. This is like the best T-Rex ever. Mm-hmm. And and it, it was a wonderful discovery with this skull.
What makes Sue such a good T-Rex?
She's the most complete, super preservation. The skull had some crushing to it, but you can see there's a picture of Sue up there on the wall.
Sure.
So it was just, we hadn't kept it secret. It was big newspaper articles about it and stuff, and
you were excited.
We were excited about it. We had a team of we had gotten a team of researchers together to do research on it, like 20 different scientists who were going to, because it was the most complete one ever found.
Right.
And because our crew here are the best preparators in the world for fossils, you could see details that you could never see on any other specimen that had ever been collected to date. And then so we were all just dumbfounded when they said we had collected on federal land. Well, I knew that was not true, but that's the premise that they used to take the fossil away.
So when the FBI showed up, you all had done a bunch of work on it. And guys, there's really, this documentary, it won that Emmy for a reason. It's a really fascinating documentary that covers this in just really wonderful detail. But y'all had that in your possession for a long time.
Yeah, almost 2 years.
And you were like kind of that close. You had just recently sort of done one of the biggest.
We had just lifted the pelvis off of the skull, and this was an 8,000-pound block that we slowly took apart and took the legs off, or the one leg off, and then the pelvis eventually, and all the other, then the neck and everything that was in this one big package. There were a lot smaller packages too, but anyway.
You just got and done the hard part.
We'd done, yes, the hard part, and they waited because we had it lined up to CT scan at Martin Marietta, one of the NASA places, to the space capsules and stuff like that, to CT scan our skull. And we had it anyway. So it was not fun, but we helped because this is an important fossil. We didn't want it to be hurt. And the morning of the raid, my lawyer, Pat Duffy, said, this is probably, you're thinking this is the worst thing that has ever happened to me. And he said, you're right. It's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Mm-hmm. And he said, hopefully nothing else is going to happen to you that's any worse than this. But he said, remember in the back of your mind, this could also be the best thing that's ever happened to you. Mm. And so to make a long story short, we went through the longest, it was a super long investigation. We went through the longest criminal trial in South Dakota history. And I for failure to fill out forms, was put in prison for I had a 24-month prison sentence and 24 months of supervised release.
Was this related to Sue?
No.
Right.
No. because they, Sue couldn't. And so in order to keep Sue away from us, the judge said Sue was Morris Williams had put that particular parcel, Morris Williams, Native American, he's Dakota, and he had put that particular parcel in trust, which means he didn't have to pay taxes on it.
So it's kind of like
property taxes, and it's one of the few benefits that Native Americans get. And so he said, well, it's federal property because the federal government has that title to the land. And we appealed that to the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. They said, no, the land, the land belongs to Morris Williams. It doesn't belong to the federal government.
Right. It's held in trust.
It's held in trust, right?
Federal government for Morris Williams.
Right. Just like if you had something in trust for your child, it's not your property. It's your child's property. You're just taking care of it for them.
Yeah. When they turn like 40, they'll get it.
Yeah. And so anyway, so then they came up more litigation and stuff, and they came up, well, so you had to have permission from the Bureau of Indian Affairs in order to collect this. And so they took it back. And when the dinosaur was seized, ironically, the guy who was wanting to run for Senate, who was the prosecutor, a guy by the name of Kevin Schieffer, said, we're seizing this because we know they're going to sell this to the highest, put it to auction for the highest bidder, which we've never, ever auctioned a fossil, ever, even today.
Oh,
we
really?
never have. And it was for our museum. It wasn't to make money from. Anyway, so interestingly enough, then Morris Williams said, "Okay, I want to auction this off," and so the federal government literally put it up for auction, and at Sotheby's auction house, and it brought $8.36 million with the Auctioneers Commission.
I'm so confused in that. Okay, if it was the federal government's property, how come Morris Williams got to auction off and get the money?
Because it wasn't the federal government's; it was belonged to Morris Williams.
Okay,
so there was that lie that was perpetrated through the whole thing until the very end, when the Eighth Circuit clarified, no, it's Morris Williams' property. Federal government is only the trustee.
So all this happened, and then after the Eighth Circuit, it was like, oh, just kidding.
Kind of, yeah.
Why did they care so much? Why do you feel like it was a
publicity stunt? It was a publicity stunt for the prosecutor. That's why it happened that way.
And then you were just like the unlucky.
Yeah. So one of the things I learned, and this is really important to know, the justice system is about winning. It isn't necessarily trying to define right and wrong. I mean, you can see today all the stuff that's happening in the courts right now. It's about winning. It's not about right and wrong. It's about interpretation. And no matter what, some people, some lawyers will do whatever it takes to win. Some lawyers will not. They will, they believe in right and wrong. But it's just the way things happen.
This was like a big deal for the community too, because you were going to kind of make this like the thing here.
Yes, yeah. It was going to be the anchor of our museum. Yep.
And Andrew, come here, check this out. Are these actually from that period?
Yeah, from that period. Yeah, we had free Sioux runs and people people donating to get money to our cause for legal fees and stuff like that. Because I mean, you could imagine. It wasn't just me, it was the Institute, it was Bob Farrar, it was my brother Neil, it was Terry Wentz, it was Ed Cole, it was a guy we bought fossils from, a guy we sold fossils to, that were all indicted. It was a 38 count indictment with 53 charges and all these defendants, and everybody had to have their own lawyer. It was just a horribly expensive undertaking. We could have built a museum with the money that was spent on the case. Which is lucky we had lots of people that donated and helped us out.
Oh, of course.
And one of the coolest things was how wonderful human beings are, how they, bonded together and banded together and were just so angry about this whole thing. So, sure, there was a lot of unfun things, but there were also some really important things, important life lessons for me, important bonds that were made with people, and it sorts your friends out pretty fast.
Yeah, sure. Sure. Hardships have a way of doing that, man.
Yeah. And although I would never want anybody to anybody else to undergo anything like this, that it's part of my life that I am proud of, from all these people who helped us out and everything else. And I'm proud of the way people handled themselves. They did really, excellent work. And And I learned so many things. Like I know so much about prisons and how crappy they are. And just from personal experience now, which not many people can have that.
Yeah, that's you ended up in prison for 2 years.
Well, yeah. Well, I got 90 days off for good behavior.
Oh, nice. That's good.
Which is the maximum you can get.
Wow.
And then 2 years probation.
It was surprising to you. Okay, so I know that these things happen concurrent, and I think that this is like a common conflation of things that people who are like familiar with the Sue story and also familiar with, your history, they go, oh, well, he went to prison for Sue. And that's not what happened.
No, it wasn't. We were forbidden to even mention the name Sue at the trial.
That is a part that I like in that documentary where they're kind of going through like that. Here's what you cannot say. And like, what was the deal with that? Like I understand it has something to do with
it's politics,
import and bringing some.
Oh, so
yeah, like what happened?
My two felony convictions were we had a trade show in Japan, and from that I brought $31,700 in traveler's checks. They were all restrictively endorsed. So deposited them in the bank. The government knew we did it because we declared them on our taxes.
Right. Yeah,
and then we were at the same time working in Peru. And we were building a museum, physically building a museum, buying material for it, paying people to help, and with a Swiss friend of ours, Kirby Sieber. And so together, Susan Hendrickson and I each carried $7,000, she carried $8,000 down, and which is more than $10,000. And I didn't know. Same Sue.
So not a dinosaur.
Sue. Not a dinosaur. Right. Susan Hendrickson, the one who found Sue. Anyway, so it turns out you have to fill out paperwork if you take more than $10,000 out of this country. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And so, yeah, I took it out. And I hand carried those $31,700 in traveler's checks. We had two customs agents who said, if I had to are you carrying more than $10,000 cash? I checked no. When you fly, and I wasn't. They were restrictively endorsed. They were non-negotiable. And we had two customs agents said, you don't have to declare those. But the judge said it's not a defense that they were restrictively endorsed. If you find he carried them in, which I readily admit, said you must find him guilty. That's the instruction to the jury. So
basically what had happened is you were going down with Sue to purchase some fossils we were
working with a permit with the Peruvian government. We were collecting fossils down there. We were building this museum, and we were taking fossils to Lima and putting up exhibits in Lima and the Natural History Museum in Lima as well. And so for that, we are allowed to export fossils, which then we can sell to other museums and things. And some we donated to museums, some we sold to museums. Many of them we still have here.
You come back, and somebody's like, "Oh, you did it bad," and they go, "These restrictive traveler's checks that you have used to do the business, which you've been very upfront about, it doesn't matter that those are."
Restrictively endorsed. They were non-negotiable. I couldn't have, given them to somebody and we deposited them in the.
Yeah, you could have gone to the strip club with them.
No, I couldn't have even done that because we always, when we were doing work in Japan, they give you cash, but then you convert them to traveler's checks, which you get a better rate than converting them to cash. And I don't like carrying a bunch of cash.
Well, yeah, sure.
And so we always had a stamp with us. It's for deposit only. And I explained this, and then they showed the traveler's checks, and there was my stamp on them. For deposit only, Black Hills Institute.
And why? And you think that this is pretty like a conveniently timed thing?
Well, they did. So they had not only did they seize Sue, they also demanded all of our records. And then they had a second raid that they came and took more stuff. And they took a whole mess of fossils from us. We never got back. All kinds of stuff that
and they found, did they find this out when they were going through all these records? Is that what?
Yeah, well, then they had the IRS, IRS agents and everything. I mean, it was like a big deal. It was a big deal.
See, I was wondering, I guess that was like
one of the IRS agents, you see him in the movie.
Yeah, that was the part that was like kind of unclear to me. I was like, well, how did they, I kind of understand like the advantage of kind of sidelining you in a really pretty heavy way. But that's how they became aware of it. They found the record.
And I was very vocal through the whole thing because I thought it was wrong. I thought that this is no way to treat a fossil. This is no way to treat human beings.
What, so ultimately you went in, you served your time, you came out. What was the fate of Sue? So she got sold at auction. Where is she now?
She's at the Field Museum in Chicago, which is, I like to say it's the second best place she could be.
Yeah. What makes you like the Field Museum?
They have like more than 1 million visitors a year. You know, there are other museums that are comparable. The Houston Museum in Houston, Texas, the Houston Museum of Natural Science. Denver Museum would have been a good place for her too. LA County has a couple T-Rexes, so they didn't need another one, but Houston now has one that we sold them to. So,
what are your thoughts? I mean, like, I kind of get a sense of what you're going to say here, but what were your thoughts as far as like you're looking back on the whole thing? If you were to put it in a nutshell, like, what's the takeaway for you? Like, what are your thoughts on the whole thing?
I think just basically, it was a really wonderful life lesson for me. About how important family and friends are. It was, because of all the people that stood up for us, we were able to survive. We're here. We're going gangbusters. We're better than ever. We're going to put up a museum that is going to put many museums to shame because we have the best people working here. And, this is a bit crowded, more dinosaurs per square centimeter than any museum in the world. But we're not going to keep that same density, but it's going to be close because we have lots of things that are in storage that aren't on exhibit and lots of things that aren't even prepared yet. So, this is our 51st year in business. Over the next 50 years, I hope that I can be involved in continuing building the museum.
Tell people how to find you. You just started up a YouTube channel. That's like pretty cool.
I'm on Peter Larson T-Rex on Instagram too. I haven't been able to post much because we've got this museum project we're working on that we've got to keep secret, which is just driving me nuts because I'm the worst person to keep secrets. But and then the YouTube channel and bhigr.com. Which is our website, and that'll be increasing substantially now. We've got some kind of making a big push to be in the 21st century now. So,
and of course, people can come by the shop. We're going to have B-roll right now, or by the museum.
And we're in Hill City, South Dakota, in the center of the Black Hills. We're 7 miles from Mount Rushmore. It's a big tourist area. It's one of the. If I had to pick a place anywhere in the world to live, I'd pick here. I love this. I love this place.
I was telling Andrew on the ride out here, I was like, dude, I love the Black Hills. I spent some time like hunting turkeys and stuff out here. And every time I come here, I'm like, gosh, this is such a cool spot.
And we're surrounded by fossils. I mean, it's one of the most rich areas in the world for fossil collecting. And so I'm in the right place.
Super cool. And you guys are open, what are your like days, hours?
So we're open Monday through Saturday. And hopefully this summer we'll get enough people. It's been hard to get people to work. There's been not enough people that are applying for work. Sure. So we're hoping to get enough employees to keep it open on Sunday over the summers, which is what we normally do. Yeah, but awesome. Since COVID, we haven't been able to keep open on Sunday, just not been able to get enough people.
COVID changed a lot of things for a lot of folks.
It did. Huh? It did. Yeah.
But you guys should definitely come check this out. I'm going to show you something here. You can come. You got little kids. They went and saw Mount Rushmore and they didn't really give a shit. You can have them come here and touch a dinosaur. They can literally touch a Triceratops. Look at all this stuff. Show them, Andrew. I mean, we got B-roll for days going in here, but like, I'm pitching you hard, man. This is the museum that I would have wanted to visit when I was a kid. It's like completely navigable. You can see stuff for 10 hours in here. You could walk around here for 25 minutes and you'd see some really, really great. I just love this spot, man. I kind of can't believe it. This is the first time I've ever been here.
You have to come visit us more often.
I'd like to, man. Hey, let's go grab a beer or something, man. Thank you so much. Hey, we'll see you guys next time. Links in the description. Thanks for tuning in, and
Come visit our museum.
Yes, that.
Everybody, thanks for watching this episode of the Backcountry Manifesto podcast. If you want more Backcountry Manifesto, go ahead and check out one of these links right here. And make sure to share the podcast with your friends, comment, like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. It really helps us out. Again, thank you very much for watching. Now go check out one of these things. I like this one. This one was a good episode, I promise.